Dear students, my name is Odufeso Tajudeen. Students, you are welcome to Odufeso Tajudeen online class. I'm your economics teacher. Today we want to discuss on inflation and deflation. Subtopic, we want to look at types, causes of inflation and deflation. Okay, let's move forward. At the end of this class, student, you should be able to define inflation. You should be able to list any three types of inflation. You should be able to define deflation. You should be able to outline types of inflation that we have. Okay, let's take it one by one today. Inflation. What is inflation? Inflation may be defined as a persistent rise in the general price level of goods and services. What did I say today? Can be defined as a persistent rise in the general price of goods and services, and that is very simple definition. When the price of goods increases daily, increases all the time, is what we call inflation. Then we can also explain inflation. Inflation occur when the volumes of purchasing is permanently running ahead of production with too much of money in the circulation. In the what? In the circulation. So this what makes inflation to occur is because when there is a volumes of purchasing is permanently running ahead of production, and that's what causes inflation. Look at the chart on the screen, student. It's actually talking about inflation. You can see the arrow, you can see the arrow, you can see the money. Here we have two coins of money, we have three, we have four. As the price of goods rise, all the time, is what we call what? Inflation. The general increase in the price of goods and services. Okay, now this is another one. A rise in the price of goods and services. When the price of goods always increases is what we call inflation. And this one is very simple definition that you can understand. Inflation can be defined as a rise in the price of goods and services. And that one is clear on the chart. I hope you are getting that, student. Okay, beautiful. Now let's move to the types of inflation. Types of inflation: we have demand pull inflation. Two, we have cost push inflation. Three, we have imported inflation. Four, we have hyperinflation. Five, we have open inflation. Then we have creeping inflation. For the purpose of this class, we are going to explain few types of inflation which we are going to discuss now. Don't forget, we have demand pull inflation, cost push inflation, imported fuel inflation, hyperinflation, open inflation, creeping inflation, and so on and so forth. Now, let's take it one by one. Demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation: consumer have higher purchasing power, leading the increase in the aggregate demand without corresponding increase in supply, and that's what we call demand pull inflation. Now let's look at the cost push inflation. Cost push inflation occur when increase in the cost of production are passed on the customer in the form of higher price of goods and services, and that's what we call push cost push what? Inflation. Okay, let's look at this. Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation can also known as galloping or runaway inflation. We can call it galloping or runaway inflation, which occur when the persistent inflation becomes uncontrollable and the value of money keep declining rapidly, decline daily, decline all the time. And that is what is happening in Nigeria. When there is persistent inflation, when the price of goods are uncontrollable, and this is very dangerous types of inflation. It affects the poor, it affects the rich, especially the poor. It affects them when there is when the price of goods cannot be controlled. Okay, so let's look at it. Persistent or creeping inflation. Persistent or creeping inflation is also known as chronic. This one is worse than the galloping inflation. We call it chronic inflation, which occur when there is a slow but steady rise in the volume of purchasing power and fall in the supply of goods and services. Okay, what are the causes of inflation? Causes of inflation. One, increase in demand. When there is increase in demand, when too much of pressure in buying goods and services in the market or anywhere. Low production. Low production can also cause inflation. War, when there is war in the country or any place, can cause, when there is war, many resources, many goods, many lives, will waste. Many lives will wasted. So therefore, it will make the goods of goods and services increases. Then increase in salaries and wages can also cause inflation. High cost production can also cause what? Inflation. Budget deficit. When the income when the income is higher than the expenditure. Sorry, when the expenditure is higher than the income. So can also cause inflation. Then population increase can also cause what? Inflation. These are the causes. Then another one is excessive bank lending can also cause inflation. Level of importation can also cause inflation. Holding inadequate of storage facility, strike, industrial strike can also cause inflation, and so on and so forth. So now let's look at the effects of inflation. Inflation has both positive and negative effects. Now let's look at the positive effects. The positive effects of inflation are: one, reduction in the burden of debts; then higher profit margin; higher tax yield; higher outputs. These are positive what? Inflation. Now let's look at the negative effect of inflation. It's discourage savings. you know, as part of negative effects, when there is inflation, it will discourage savings. Then it will increase interest rates in the bank. Then income redistributions to also affect them. Then creditor loss. So these are the negative effects. Then loss of values for money. Fall in the standard of living. It will discourage investments. Balance of payment problems. It discourage exports. So these are the negative effect of you can say that the negative effect of inflation is are more than the positive effects. Okay, let's move forward. How can we control inflation? Inflation can be controlled when we use what we call contradiction monetary measure. When there is a policy that control the monetary aspects in the society, can also control inflation. We can also control inflation when we use what we call fiscal measure. When there is a policy that will make people to reduce the price of goods. Then effective control, price control, that one, it is only government that can intervene on that. So by doing so, inflation can be what? Control. Reduction in the government expenditure and surplus budget can also control inflation. Then industrialization, creation of industry can also control inflation. Check in the activities of holders can also control inflation. Increase production, removal of bottleneck in the distribution, discouragement of importation can also control what? Inflation. Now let's move to the deflation. We have discussed inflation, we have discussed types of inflation, the causes of inflation, and how can we control inflation. Now let's look at the deflation. What is deflation? Deflation may be defined as a continuous fall in the price level of goods and services. I have said it earlier. The opposite meaning of inflation is deflation. Inflation is when there is persistent increase in the price of goods, but this one, when there is persistent fall, continuous fall in the price level of goods and services. Okay, if you look at the chart now, when there is deflation, money coming down from the higher to what? To lower. So then this are another examples of what? Inflation is actually talking about what? Deflation. deflation. Okay, what are the causes of deflation? Budget surplus can cause deflation. Increase in bank rate can cause inflation. Increase in production can also cause deflation. Increase in taxation can cause deflation. I hope you are jotting down, student. Now let's look at the effect of deflation. Decline in profits. When the profit of a consumer, product manufacturers or investors low can cause deflation. It results in unemployment, fall in price of goods, reduction in the investment, creditors gain, it discourage export and so on. These are the effect of deflation. Then how can we control deflation? Reduction in taxation, the use of deficit budgeting, reduction in bank rates, increase in wages and salaries, then use of um open market operation can control what we call inflation. I hope you get that, student. Okay, if yes, what is inflation? Oh, beautiful. Can you mention any three types of inflation? Oh, beautiful. Then what is deflation? Good. Can you mention types of deflation? Oh, beautiful. That is nice one. Now take this as an assignment. You can do that at the back of your note, or you do it on my WhatsApp for the purpose of correction. Student, thank you and God bless you. Bye bye.